it would be that so many 100 years ago this occurred, or so many 100 years ago, or 102 years ago this event took place. It used to be that that was the way that this oral history was told. The teachings among our people and the way that time is reckoned. We have several games. Some are played in the wintertime that we call Keshje, which is the shoe game. And then in the summertime we have other games than that. But there's one that's called stick dice. And it involves 3 flat pieces of real light wood, cottonwood. And they're not very long, maybe about 5 inches long and about maybe 2 inches wide, but it's kind of, they're thin and probably about a half an inch thick. But on one side is colored with black charcoal made dark, and the other one is side of the dice is white. And so that is used in the game, and it involves a circle. And that circle, you have the opening to the north and to the south and to the west and to the north. And in between those gaps, the openings, are 10 stones. And so you have 40 stones in all. And those spaces are called an in our language, which would mean a hole. But the translation of it in English, sometimes they apply the word the well, so they have 4 wells in the 4 different directions. But in our language, we say tio, an, that means there are 2 holes in the game as you go in a clockwise direction. But the game is played in such a way that you take the 3 pieces of wood, and there's a rock in the center, and you drop the 3 pieces of wood on that rock, and whatever the numbers are, you count 2 or 3 or 1, and then you move the token that you would be using individually in one of the gaps between the stone, and the purpose is to go all the way around, and whoever wins, they get to take over all of the property in that was put up for betting. But that's one game. But that's a very important game in the way that it talks about the history of the Ne as they came from the direction east out to this part of the continent. And Tsatik is what they call the game. And the name, as I mentioned, is probably translated to mean the wood dice. But there's another game that we play in the wintertime. It's called Keshje, and that's putting 4 shoes or 2 pair of shoes in the ground. One would be to the north or to the east, and then the other 4 would be in the ground at the other end of the hogan to the west. This is also a game that is done in the wintertime, and it's a game where all of the different animals were involved, and the hiding of the token inside of the shoe, and then having somebody of the 2 teams that would be taking a guess and saying it's in this shoe, or it's in this shoe, or that shoe, or this shoe. But if you guess that, then you get so many points, and the points are kept in a bundle of yucca stem, and this is the thin yucca. Sastats is what they call that score that you win, and there's 102 of those. And the reason I share this information about 102 yucca stems is that it is very important to know that traditionally our people kept the dates and that by saying 1 generation Tahada Nache. And Nache included both the male and the female grandparents. And so when the yucca stems are used in the shoot game, there are 102 of those yucca stems. And that was symbolic and to remind us that one generation is 102 years. And so it was that whenever the stories of among our traditional people were told, they would always refer to how many generation or how many grandfather time had passed. They would say Nache, Te Pitata, Nache Da, or it would be that so many 100 years ago this occurred, or so many 100 years ago, or 102 years ago this event took place. It used to be that that was the way that this oral history was told. And so it is that if we were to use that reckoning, the Neh came to this place, which is called the High Desert, or the Colorado Plateau. And they arrived here according to the reckoning of time, Te Pitata, which would mean 18 generations ago. The Neh came to this place, and that would put us about 200 AD. And it was that the Neh reckoned that time that the Neh arrived from the east onto this Colorado Plateau sometime around 200 AD. And so that was Nache, Te Pitata, Nache Da, and that was the way that the stories were told. And then down through the years, they say, Aslata, Aslata, Titata, Nache Anta, Anasaza, what is Lane, which would put the Anasazi people 300, possibly 400 years after the Neh had been in this area for several generations. So that is the only thing I can share with you as far as the way that the Neh kept time and the way the Neh talk about where they came from and what they did while they were traveling to this place. And it's preserved in the games and that our people play. And not only that, it's also in the string games. String games have other portions of history that we are to learn. And someone was asking about the what we call the sun. And we say Jehona E, which would translate to mean the one that watches you by sunlight. But the actual sun itself, they used to refer to that as Sontso. But in recent times, they've given one of the planets that is in the solar system that name, and they began to call it Sontso. But originally it was the sun that was called Sontso, the largest star, and that was the things that we were told.